Welcome back to this meeting of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee. Cabinet Secretary, I'm sorry that we delayed you slightly, but you can imagine that the climate change plan was quite a lengthy subject, and I'm sure you'll experience the same next week, but I apologise for keeping you waiting. Our item 4 on the agenda is consideration of a draft statutory instrument, the Digital Waste Tracking Scotland Regulations 2026. The Delegated Powers and Law Reform Committee has drawn the instrument to the Parliament's attention under the General Reporting Grounds in the respect of to a number of areas where they are set out in the Clerk's note. I would welcome to the meeting Gillian Martin, Climate Secretary for Climate Action and Energy, and her supporting officials, Hayden Thomas, the Producer Responsibility Unit Head, and Elisa Heine, the Solicitor for the Scottish Government. The instrument is laid under the affirmative procedure, which means that it cannot come into force until the Parliament approves it. Following the evidence session, the committee will be invited to consider a motion to recommend that the instrument be approved. I remind everyone that the Scottish Government officials can speak under this item, but not in the debate that follows. Before Cabinet Secretary asks you to make your opening statement, I would just note that some of the comments regarding this bit of legislation from the Delegated Powers and Law Reform Committee note that there were 5 errors in what is ostensibly quite a short instrument, which I think is quite a huge amount, and I'd be grateful if you could cover that off in your opening statement when you do it. Did you want to make a short opening statement?
Yes, I do. I will just get my information up about the errors so that I can include that at your request. Thank you, Convener. Around 9.5 million tonnes of waste is produced in Scotland each year, but there's no single or comprehensive system to track it currently. So to achieve a more circular economy and to tackle waste crime, we must ensure we have current and accurate information about what waste has been produced and where it ends up. So to do this, the Digital Waste Tracking Scotland Regulations 2026 introduced the first phase of a new mandatory digital waste tracking system, which has been rolled out in all 4 nations, and this will transform existing outdated paper-based systems for recording waste movements and will address the information gap that hinders the effective regulation and management of waste, and it should make it easier for those in the industry who operate within the law and reduce opportunities for waste crime for those that don't. It will ensure that resources are being properly recycled or recovered and fed back into the economy. And the system has been in development for over 5 years. It's had significant business input, including through a waste user panel, including over 450 operators in Scotland. It will support our alignment with developments in the EU, including meeting requirements for digital recording of hazardous waste and waste containing persistent organic pollutants. And the first phase of the implementation will apply to facilities which are authorised by SEPA to carry out a waste activity and commence on a mandatory basis from the 1st of January 2027 in Scotland. Equivalent Phase 1 regulations are planned in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and will work closely with those governments and the UK environmental regulators to support alignment and delivery across 4 nations. The errors that you mentioned are very minor. I'll give you an example. We've got definitions of end of quarter and quarter where we're included and then not in Regulation 2 but not used in the draft regulations. There's just some drafting errors that don't have any impact on the meaning of the instrument. We have actually fed back, because obviously in this the 4 nations approach to all of it, including the SSI last week and the ones this week, we have fed back that after the negotiations and the drafting going through all 4 nations, there needs to be an additional quality assurance step. We've been feeding that back as a result of the minor errors that have been brought to our attention. In terms of correcting the errors, because there's going to be a phase 2 associated with this particular piece of work, we're aiming to use that process to amend the errors in this instrument, because they have actual no material effect and they're just drafting errors. So hopefully that clarifies, and I thank the committee for their time and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary, and I accept they are drafting errors, but it will mean that some amendments will be needed to the legislation. It's always better for a committee, in my opinion, to get the polished items. So, what waste streams are covered by this SSI?
Well, the waste streams will be those that are that come into a waste activity at permitted facilities. We'll use the phrase receiving sites, and this will exclude, though, household recycling centres at local authority level. But that doesn't mean to say that waste won't make its way into that digital system, because once it's actually been taken on by the local authority, it will be delivered to a receiving site, and that's the point at which it will be entered. Future phases, all waste movements from waste generation to the end state will be recorded in the new digital system. So effectively it is waste that is received at permitted facilities and exempts household recycling centres at local authorities at the moment. But of course, as that waste is moved on to a receiving site, that's when it enters the digital system.
I think that once that's been recorded going into that receiving site, it will help us achieve our circular economy that we're looking for in Scotland regarding waste that doesn't need to be waste, as it were. Reducing it.
Yeah, I think it's actually going to be really instrumental in helping that, because it's going to improve the quality and accuracy of the reporting of the waste data, what's actually out there. It will mean that it can support any kind of future regulations, so we've got that actual very clear picture of what waste streams that there are. It will be digital. And it will mean that it will integrate and simplify the recording of waste, and it will bring together sort of currently separate systems into one, so that the regulator can gather and interrogate that information that is needed. And they'll start to see trends associated with that, and then they'll start to make recommendations to government for any kind of future legislation. But it also will help very much to reduce waste crime. So it's going to be increasing that transparency for all parties in the waste chain, because they'll all have to be putting into this digital system. And where there are people that have not put into the digital system or are handling waste, obviously the regulator will be able to step in.
And do you think it will stop or reduce the amount of unsold goods that find their way to disposal?
So I need clarification on that, convener. Would it reduce the amount of unsold goods that make the way?
Well, some unsold goods are just put into the waste cycle, and I'm just trying to work out if this is going to, if we're recording what's going into waste, whether the unsold goods will be picked up, because they probably still have some use unless it's unsold. You know, we'll certainly
get a more accurate picture of the types of waste that are coming in, and obviously unsold goods that are being put into maybe any kind of receiver will be recorded. So we'll certainly be able to see trends, and maybe if there's particular issues with a particular waste stream. The actual recording of it itself, I guess, won't diminish the at source. It's just recording what goes in, but certainly it will give us the data to be able to assess what actions need to be taken.
That's the key last bit, was the interesting bit there. Thank you. Sarah, you've got some questions.
Thank you, convener. I just wanted to ask about the arrangements for digitally excluded persons and how that's going to work in practice. Is that going to be at SEPA's discretion, and will there be a database of exclusions? And do you expect a lot of operators to be included? Because I noted in your opening remarks, Cabinet Secretary, 450 Scottish operators involved in the process. So just getting a sense of the numbers.
So it's going to be a very, very small amount, but digitally excluded persons are going to be exempted from the use of the tracking system for obvious reasons. And what will happen there is that SEPA will have a record of them, and they'll have to produce written records and submit information through a non-digital route to SEPA. So it's not as if they're exempted from reporting, they're just exempted from having to use this particular system.
So the information will still get added into the system so we can look at the analysis?
Yes, it will. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, convener.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about compatibility with international systems. I know that the EU, there's development of these kind of waste tracking systems in the EU.
So, do you mean the sort of interface between the actual software?
Well, yes, all aspects of the systems.
Well, my understanding is that the systems are really for use sort of domestically here. They're not having to interface with any other digital systems because it's not as if that data or they're having to sort of have an interface with it. But obviously, in terms of the regulations, these regulations are to keep us in line with EU developments. So more broadly, in terms of the policy space and the actual, I suppose, the EU obviously we want to be alongside the EU in terms of having a digital tracking system, but it's not as if the data or the systems that we're using in Scotland will actually have to interface with any systems out with the UK.
Though transnational shipments between the EU and Scotland at some point.
Bring Hayden in on that. I mean, I'm
just thinking about electronics and other areas where there might be resources which have got a bigger supply chain.
Just checking, you can hear?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably three aspects to it. So there are certain waste streams that are required to have digital waste tracking in the EU, and we made certain commitments around keeping up with those digital requirements before we left the EU. So thinking particularly about things like hazardous waste. So we would need to build this system to deal with those commitments anyway. That's kind of the baseline scenario we talk about. There's a broader, I suppose, direction of travel in the EU to move towards digital reporting of all waste. So that's in line with that system. In terms of the specific interactions, certain waste shipments would need to be tracked in the EU system. That's not kind of what's covered by these regulations, but that is something that operators would need to do if they are exporting certain types of waste to the EU. So in a sense, that kind of makes it easier. If they're already creating those records digitally in Scotland, then they're not having to kind of comply with two sets of requirements, existing paper set of requirements in Scotland and a separate digital set for the EU.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, and Cabinet Secretary, this information that's collected when the waste being tracked will be made available to local authorities for their statutory duties. Part of getting people to change their mind is to tell them as much information about what the waste they're doing. So will it be used to try and influence public opinion on correct waste management?
I think it comes back to that initial question that you asked there about the analysis of having that complete set of data in a digital space will allow us to sort of assess trends. And of course, part of that will be what we do in terms of the public, in terms of like informing them how to reduce their waste. And so I think very much it's a recording system. It's a data collection system in terms of the waste, but obviously the learnings of that and having that in a digital space and being able to do the analysis of that digitally will mean that it will inform quite a lot of campaigns going forward and indeed any future regulations or legislation that we want to do in this space. Okay,
just very briefly then, always about releasing data. You've got to think about data protection. You've obviously thought about that. Are there any risks?
No, there's not going to be any more data available publicly than there is right now. Effectively, what this is taking a paper system, which exists just now, turning it into a digital system in terms of the software that businesses will have to use to input that. But it's not as if commercially sensitive data or that granular source data is going to be available to the public. It will just be the sort of like general reports that you have now. There won't be any difference to what's reported.
Okay, thank you. Just looking around to see if there's any other questions from the committee. There doesn't appear to be. So we'll move on to item 5, which is a debate on S6M 20458, calling for the committee to recommend that the Digital Waste Tracking Scotland Regulations 2026 be approved. Cabinet Secretary, I'm going to ask you to speak to and move the motion.
I'll just move the motion in the interest of time.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Just looking around to see if any of the committee want to make any contributions. There are no contributions apart from in the previous section. Cabinet Secretary, you are entitled to sum up if you want to.
No, there's no need.
Thank you. So the question is that motion S6M 20458 in the name of this Cabinet Secretary be approved. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I'm just going to invite the committee to formally delegate to me the authority as convener to approve the draft report for publication. I notice you're all nodding. Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, and thank you to your officials, who I think now are going to change. So we'll very briefly suspend the meeting just to allow a quick shift of officials.